5G, or the fifth generation mobile network, is beginning to roll out worldwide. With it, outcries about its potential ill effects from concerned citizens, newspapers, and even governments. Theories proclaim this harmful radiation might cause various forms of cancer and is even killing birds. We know that some electromagnetic radiation can cause health problems in humans. So, should we be rolling out this technology before long-term testing? Or does our current science already have the airways cleared for human safety?
This helps provoke the evotranspiration. All these three ideals of liberal democracy.
Starting at the low end of the spectrum is the extremely low frequency band, or ELF, which translates to 3 to 30 Hz. So every second, one wave goes up 3 to 30 times. Information is transmitted every time the wave completes an oscillation. These long, low-frequency waves can penetrate through land and water, hence their usage in submarines. As we move up the frequencies, more information can be transmitted per second, but the waves themselves don't penetrate through substances as well. The next notable step up is the AM and FM radio bands. We're now moving into the million hertz or megahertz bands. The current 4G network runs at 700 MHz to a few thousand megahertz, or a few gigahertz. Now, the maligned 5G network is expected to run on two frequencies, one under 6 GHz and the other a bit above 24 GHz, or 24 billion cycles per second. This much higher frequency allows us to transfer data at 1 gigabit per second. As mentioned before, the physics also means that it struggles to pass through substances as easily, such as our homes. So the 5G network is a higher frequency than 4G, but still much, much lower than visible light, which sits around 600,000 gigahertz. Now, how does this relate to cancer-causing radiation? Well, there does exist electromagnetic radiation that can damage atoms by knocking off its electrons. An atom that has lost an electron is called an ion. This is where the term ionizing radiation comes from. Ionizing radiation lies just outside the visible light spectrum, at 30 million gigahertz, just after the color violet. Hence, this radiation frequency is aptly named ultraviolet radiation, or UV radiation. This is well known to cause cancer in humans, as it's damaging the atoms that make up our DNA. As we move further up the electromagnetic spectrum to X-rays and then gamma rays, the lethality increases. Conversely, radiation that lies in the visible light spectrum and below does not have the energy to knock off electrons in atoms, therefore is classified as non-ionizing radiation, and therefore cannot cause cancer. The frequency and energy is just too low to damage atoms. There has been hundreds of studies over the past few decades investigating this link, with none showing a clear link between non-ionizing radiation and cancer.
But what about the two major studies relating to non-ionizing radiation and cancer that were released by the National Institutes of Health in the USA? The ones that are mentioned every time cancer and mobile phones comes up. One of the studies exposed rats to the electromagnetic radiation put out by mobile phones running at the relatively low frequency of 900 MHz. Some 180 male and female rats were exposed to this radiation over their whole body, not just their heads. Now, the radiation levels were much higher than a human would get from their mobile phone. And the rats were exposed for 9 hours a day, 7 days a week, for 2 continuous years. Surprisingly, the male rats that were exposed to the radiation actually lived longer than the non-exposed rats. However, they did have more cancers of the heart and brain, but weirdly, only for the male rats. The other study exposed 180 male and female mice to another frequency used by mobile phones, 1900 MHz. Again, they were exposed to very high levels of radiation for approximately 9 hours each day, 7 days per week, for 2 continuous years. And again, the male mice that were exposed to radiation lived longer than the control mice that were not exposed. And the male mice that were irradiated had higher levels of cancer, this time in the skin and lungs. But in this study, the female mice that were exposed to radiation did not get off scot-free. They had higher levels of malignant lymphomas. Now, wait a minute. That sounds like evidence that non-ionising radiation can cause cancer, right? Well, when you look at the actual statistics, the numbers of rats with cancer were all very low, all in the single digits. This is a very small sample size, and that's a big problem. According to the neurologist, Dr. Stephen Novella, and I quote, "The fact that the data was negative in female rats, in male and female mice, and for most tumour types is important. It limits the applicability of the results, and it suggests they may be just random noise, or due to some confounding factor," unquote. So, the results are still fuzzy. We need a bigger sample size. And on average, the radiation-exposed mice did live longer. However, this study is usually misquoted as showing that the radiation from mobile phones causes cancer in humans and reduces our life expectancy. But where is this fake news about mobile phones and 5G coming from? Surprisingly, according to the New York Times, a major source of disinformation about the 5G network has been the Russian TV network, simply called RT. RT? Well, that stands for Russia Today, and it's available worldwide. RT claims that the 5G network is linked in humans to, and I quote, brain cancer, infertility, autism, heart tumours, and Alzheimer's disease, unquote. There is zero scientific proof for this, especially considering that the 5G network has been running only in a very few locations and only since the beginning of 2019.
To round things out, I'll give the last word to the other side of the debate. Professor Darius Listinsky is one of the world's leading figures on the impact of radio frequency emissions and was one of the 30 experts that made up the International Agency of Research on Cancer/World Health Organization 2011 evaluation group that classifies all radio frequency emissions, including parts of the 5G, as potential carcinogens. In 2017, Professor Listinsky brought up 5G network again when he was talking at Queensland's Griffith University. He was urging more research into the long-term health risks before the deployment of the 5G network. Professor Listinsky stresses that the 5G safety is based on assumptions rather than proof. Quote, since the 2011 IARC classification, there has been a few published studies that strengthen the notion that wireless radiation is a possible carcinogen, or might be even probably carcinogenic. He goes on to say that all the mobile networks are not tested and are based solely on assumptions. Concluding, we do not know what the health effects of long-term and close proximity exposures might be. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider subscribing, and if you want to get notified, tap the bell button as well.